From the very first day of the school year, it was clear that Jake, the kid everyone soon labeled the class clown, would stop at nothing to draw attention. Creating a reputation that teetered on the edge of brilliance and chaos, as his unpredictable antics constantly kept teachers, students, and even the janitorial staff on high alert. What started as harmless jokes and exaggerated facial expressions quickly escalated into daring stunts that had the entire school whispering, laughing, and occasionally cringing in equal measure. He would interrupt lessons with outrageous impersonations, mimic teachers' voices to perfection, and organize elaborate pranks that often skirted the limits of acceptable behavior, such as switching desks, smearing ink on chalkboards, or creating fake announcements over the intercom, all designed to provoke laughter, shock, and admiration from peers while frustrating anyone in authority. Despite repeated warnings, detention, and suspensions, Jake seemed undeterred, approaching each day with a gleeful audacity that suggested he thrived on the tension between fun and chaos. And while some students admired his creativity and confidence, others feared his unpredictability and the potential consequences of his actions. One of the earliest incidents that cemented his reputation involved a dramatic leap from the second-floor window of the classroom to impress a girl he liked, a stunt that resulted in a broken arm, a month-long suspension, and a mix of awe and horror from classmates who were torn between laughing at the audacity and fearing for his safety. Yet, by the time he returned to school, it was evident that Jake had no intention of slowing down. He approached every class, every social interaction, and even mundane school activities with a calculated mix of charm, mischief, and reckless daring that kept everyone guessing about what he might do next. Art class became one of his favorite arenas for experimentation, where he could combine his desire for attention with a minimal understanding of boundaries, and it was in this environment, surrounded by paint, brushes, and classmates who alternated between encouraging and warning him, that he would execute some of his most infamous feats. His charisma, confidence, and sheer audacity created a paradoxical mix of fear, admiration, and exasperation among teachers and students alike, setting the stage for the infamous moment when a seemingly simple dare spiraled into chaos, medical emergencies, and yet another unforgettable chapter in the legend of Jake, the class clown who consistently pushed the limits of what was funny, safe, and socially acceptable, leaving behind stories that would be retold for years with a mixture of laughter, disbelief, and incredulity. Jake's reputation as the class clown was built not just on a single stunt, but on a relentless pattern of audacity and creativity that seemed to defy both reason and consequence, as he meticulously observed the reactions of peers and teachers, learning which pranks would elicit uproarious laughter, which would draw gasps of shock, and which would provoke immediate punishment. Every morning he would enter the classroom with a mischievous gleam in his eyes, carrying with him a sense of theatricality that transformed even the most mundane school activity into an opportunity for chaos, from pretending the fire alarm had gone off to swapping teachers' coffee cups with glitter-filled containers. And he often did this with an exaggerated innocence that made it almost impossible to stay angry at him for long. His classmates were polarized. Some gravitated toward him, laughing at his antics and feeding his need for attention, while others quietly steered clear, wary of becoming collateral damage in one of his unpredictable schemes. Teachers oscillated between exasperation, admiration, and dread. They couldn't deny that he possessed remarkable creativity and social intelligence. Yet the constant disruption required a patience that few could sustain for long periods. Even routine activities like group projects or gym class became arenas. For his performative behavior, he would choreograph elaborate, comedic routines during warm-ups, or pretend to faint dramatically at the slightest provocation, drawing laughter from the room and groans from staff. Despite his frequent punishments, detentions, parent-teacher meetings, and suspensions, Jake's behavior rarely changed. Instead, he seemed to thrive under the tension between rule-following and rebellion, as if the boundaries themselves were merely suggestions, challenges to be creatively circumvented. Stories of his exploits quickly became legend among students, from swapping hall passes to creating fake pop quizzes that left entire classes in confusion, to more daring stunts that pushed physical limits like climbing lockers or dangling from ceiling beams, all designed to shock, amuse, and cement his identity as the ultimate attention seeker. By the time the infamous paint incident occurred, Jake had already become a figure of both admiration and apprehension, someone whose presence guaranteed excitement, unpredictability, and the looming possibility that today might be the day he would take one of his outrageous stunts too far, pushing the boundaries of safety, humor, and reason in ways that no one, not even the teachers, could entirely anticipate. His energy, ingenuity, and fearlessness created a paradoxical mixture of chaos and charm, drawing everyone into a world where rules were challenged, social dynamics shifted daily, and laughter was both a weapon and a shield, setting the stage for the moment in art class when curiosity, peer pressure, and sheer recklessness would converge, leading to one of the most talked about, terrifying, and unforgettable incidents of his young life. It was an ordinary afternoon in art class when Jake, fueled by an unquenchable desire for attention and peer validation, decided to escalate his antics to a level that would shock everyone in the room, turning what had been a light-hearted reputation into a life-threatening incident. As the teacher stepped out briefly to retrieve supplies, he turned to the group and challenged his classmates with a dare so outrageous that some laughed nervously while others tried to stop him, warning that the consequences could be serious. But the thrill of witnessing the spectacle overpowered caution, and Jake, ignoring every warning, proceeded to consume not one, but two entire tubes of brightly colored paint, eliciting gasps of disbelief, laughter, and mounting panic simultaneously. At first, there was a fleeting moment where everyone thought he was joking, expecting him to spit it out or laugh off the challenge as a prank. But seconds later, the reality set in, his face contorted, a faint look of regret crossed his features, and he began to clutch his stomach, muttering that he felt unwell, the room suddenly shifting from amusement to alarm. Panic escalated as he stumbled, his color draining, and finally, overwhelmed by the toxic mix of chemicals and anxiety, he collapsed to the floor, hitting his head with a sickening thud that silenced every voice in the classroom, leaving his classmates frozen, some crying, some paralyzed by fear, and others desperately trying to remember what they had learned in first aid as the severity of the situation became undeniable. When the teacher returned moments later, she was confronted with the terrifying scene of Jake lying on the floor, blue paint smeared around his mouth, and a growing sense of dread gripped her as she called 911, instructing students to stay calm, while simultaneously attempting to rouse him, her voice breaking with urgency as she barked orders and sought to assess his condition while paramedics were on their way. The minutes stretched into an eternity, each second amplifying the fear that something irreversible had occurred, and the reactions of classmates ranged from hysterical tears to stunned silence, a mix of regret, worry, and helplessness that would haunt them long after the ambulance had whisked Jake away. At the hospital, the reality of the danger hit fully. Doctors quickly assessed him, stabilized his condition, and treated him for the ingestion of toxic substances, while the students who had dared him to perform the stunt grappled with guilt, shock, and relief upon learning that he would survive, though the lesson in recklessness, attention-seeking, and the consequences of ignoring boundaries left an indelible mark on everyone involved. Despite the severity of the incident and the clear demonstration of risk, Jake's rebellious streak persisted, his suspension becoming a temporary setback rather than a deterrent. And when he returned to school, whispers of the paint incident preceded him, blending admiration for his audacity with concern for his safety, as classmates, teachers, and even the administration recognized that he had crossed a line that could not easily be ignored. Yet his charm, daring, and relentless pursuit of attention ensured that he remained a central figure in the social landscape of the school, a living example of the precarious balance between thrill, danger, and the consequences of unrestrained behavior. The paint incident became a story retold countless times, each retelling emphasizing different facets: the humor, the terror, the audacity, or the near tragedy, but underlying all of them was the stark reminder of how far Jake was willing to go for laughter and attention, and how one impulsive, reckless decision could escalate from a silly dare to a medical emergency, leaving lasting impressions on teachers, peers, and the young class clown himself, who, despite the ordeal, seemed undeterred, already plotting the next moment that would cement his notoriety and test the boundaries of his luck, courage, and the patience of everyone around him. In the weeks following the infamous paint incident, the school was abuzz with whispers, shock, and a mixture of awe and fear as students and teachers alike tried to process the reckless audacity of Jake's stunt, and while he had survived physically, unscathed thanks to swift medical intervention, the social and emotional consequences rippled through classrooms, hallways, and faculty meetings, reshaping perceptions of him as both a brilliant attention seeker and a dangerously impulsive student. Teachers grappled with how to manage his behavior, balancing disciplinary measures with recognition of his creativity and social influence, while his peers oscillated between admiration for his daring, concern for his safety, and resentment for the chaos he seemed to effortlessly create, leaving many unsure whether to encourage, discourage, or distance themselves from him. The incident sparked debates in parent circles, staff meetings, and even the student council, highlighting the thin line between humor and hazard, as administrators considered whether stricter rules, counseling, or behavioral contracts might curb his increasingly risky antics without stifling his creativity or social engagement, and the school counselor began meeting with him to understand the motivations behind his relentless pursuit of attention, uncovering layers of insecurity, desire for validation, and a need to feel recognized that fueled his extreme behavior. Socially, Jake became a figure both celebrated and feared. Younger students viewed him as a legend, older students regarded him with caution, and his classmates were forced to navigate the constant tension of enjoying his charisma while remaining wary of the potential fallout from any new stunt, creating an atmosphere where laughter, anxiety, and unpredictability were inextricably intertwined. Despite the disciplinary actions, including suspension and multiple meetings with parents and staff, Jake's confidence and charm allowed him to reintegrate seamlessly, often using humor, apology, and calculated mischief to regain social favor, and maintain his central role in the peer hierarchy, reinforcing a pattern in which the consequences of extreme behavior became part of his performance, a tension-filled cycle of risk, attention, and social negotiation. The paint incident became a cautionary tale, not only for him but for the entire student body, demonstrating the tangible dangers of ignoring limits while also highlighting the complexity of managing a student whose intelligence, creativity, and charisma could inspire and endanger in equal measure, leaving teachers, administrators, and classmates constantly balancing admiration, frustration, and vigilance. Over time, Jake seemed to internalize some lessons, showing brief moments of caution and awareness, yet the fundamental drive for attention and approval remained, manifesting in less immediately dangerous but still chaotic antics such as orchestrating elaborate pranks, manipulating social situations for dramatic effect, and testing boundaries with uncanny precision, illustrating the challenge of guiding a student whose behavior straddled the line between genius and recklessness. His story spread beyond our school, retold by students and teachers alike, creating a legendary status that blended humor, fear, and incredulity. And while the immediate physical danger of the paint incident faded, the psychological, social, and emotional impact endured, leaving everyone involved, teachers, classmates, and Jake himself, with lasting memories of the moment when one impulsive dare had the potential to change everything, solidifying his reputation as the class clown whose antics would be remembered long after the paint had dried. The paramedics had left and the school year moved forward, but whose influence, lessons, and legend continued to shape the culture, caution, and camaraderie of the student body for years to come. After the paint incident faded from immediate memory, but not from reputation, the school environment around Jake subtly but permanently changed, as teachers became more alert, classmates more cautious, and administrators increasingly involved, realizing that his behavior was no longer just disruptive comedy, but a pattern of escalating risk that could not be ignored without serious consequences. His parents were called in repeatedly, and while they initially laughed off his reputation as harmless joking, the gravity of nearly losing their son forced them to confront the reality that his need for attention had crossed into self-destructive territory, leading to tense meetings filled with promises, warnings, and behavioral agreements that Jake nodded through with an easy smile, but rarely internalized. In classrooms, teachers attempted different strategies to manage him. Some tried giving him responsibility, hoping leadership might redirect his energy, while others enforced strict discipline, believing boundaries were the only solution. But Jake adapted effortlessly, learning how to toe the line just closely enough to avoid severe punishment while still keeping eyes on him. Among students, his social standing evolved into something more complex. While he still commanded laughter and attention, a quiet undercurrent of fear and discomfort followed him, as many wondered what would happen if his next stunt went even further than the last. And some friends began distancing themselves, unwilling to be associated with another potential emergency. Rumors spread that the school was considering expulsion if one more major incident occurred, and this knowledge added a strange tension to Jake's presence, as every joke, every prank, every dramatic gesture carried the weight of potential finality, making even simple laughter feel uneasy. Despite this, Jake seemed unable or unwilling to stop, using humor as both armor and weapon, deflecting concern with jokes and masking insecurity with bravado, as if slowing down would mean fading into invisibility, a fate he feared more than punishment or pain. Teachers noticed moments when he seemed quieter, more reflective, staring out windows or fidgeting during lectures, suggesting that the bravado hid a growing awareness of consequences. Yet whenever attention drifted away, he snapped back into performance mode, unable to resist reclaiming the spotlight. The school itself felt caught in a delicate balancing act, trying to protect students while not crushing a personality that, for all its chaos, had become woven into the social fabric of the campus, and as weeks passed, it became increasingly clear that Jake's story was no longer just about jokes or stunts, but about identity, validation, and the dangerous lengths someone might go to feel seen, heard, and unforgettable in a world that often only pays attention when something goes wrong. The atmosphere at school after the paint incident slowly shifted from shock to uneasy normalization, but Jake's presence continued to feel like a ticking clock, because although the administration tightened rules around him and teachers watched his every move more carefully, his hunger for attention never truly disappeared. It simply adapted into subtler yet still disruptive forms that kept everyone on edge. His parents were now regularly called into meetings, where they sat stiffly across from administrators who tried to explain that their son was intelligent, creative and charismatic, but also dangerously impulsive. And while his parents promised stricter discipline and even therapy, it was clear they were exhausted, embarrassed, and unsure how to control a boy who seemed to thrive on chaos. In class, Jake began testing limits in quieter but more psychologically intense ways, exaggerating injuries, staging dramatic emotional breakdowns, or manipulating classmates into reactions that kept him at the center of attention without immediately breaking rules. And this new version of him unsettled people even more because it was calculated rather than reckless. Teachers struggled to respond, unsure whether to punish behavior that technically followed rules but still disrupted learning, while students grew divided between those who still found him entertaining and those who resented the constant tension he created. Rumors circulated that the school was considering transferring him, expelling him, or placing him in a special behavioral program, and the uncertainty only fueled his need to perform, as if he sensed his spotlight fading and was determined to reclaim it by any means necessary. Socially, friendships around him became fragile and transactional. People laughed with him but rarely trusted him, and many quietly distanced themselves, afraid of becoming part of his next spectacle or collateral damage in another incident. Despite moments where he seemed genuinely reflective, even remorseful, those moments never lasted long because the silence and normalcy that followed good behavior felt unbearable to him, pushing him once again toward disruption. By this point, it was clear to everyone that Jake was no longer just the class clown who went too far one time, but a student trapped in a cycle of validation, consequence, and escalation, where each attempt to control him only forced his behavior to evolve, setting the stage for a final realization that attention gained through shock and danger always comes with a cost. not just to the person seeking it, but to everyone around them. Jake's antics continued to escalate in ways that left teachers perpetually on edge and classmates oscillating between awe and exasperation, as his creativity, audacity, and relentless pursuit of attention seemed to have no limits, turning ordinary school days into unpredictable adventures filled with tension, laughter, and occasional fear. Each morning he arrived with a new scheme in mind, whether it was concocting elaborate pranks, subtly manipulating classroom situations for dramatic effect, or daring friends to join him in stunts that skirted the boundaries of safety. And while some peers gravitated toward him, drawn by his charisma and infectious confidence, others kept a careful distance, wary of becoming collateral damage in his theatrical displays. Teachers scrambled to maintain order, balancing disciplinary measures with recognition of Jake's intelligence and social influence, often feeling caught between admiration for his creativity and frustration at the chaos he generated, while administrators considered strategies ranging from behavioral contracts to counseling sessions in an attempt to mitigate risk without suppressing his personality. Socially, Jake occupied a paradoxical space. He was both celebrated and feared, a figure whose actions commanded attention and dictated peer dynamics, shaping the classroom environment with a mixture of humor, tension, and unpredictability that required constant negotiation among students and staff alike. His previous incidents, including the infamous paint dare, lingered as cautionary tales, reminding everyone that even the most seemingly playful or humorous actions could carry serious consequences. Yet these lessons rarely seemed to temper his behavior for long, as he continuously adapted, innovated, and tested new boundaries, often learning from prior mistakes but never letting them diminish his appetite for attention and admiration. Over time, his antics took on a performative quality that blurred the line between harmless mischief and calculated risk, illustrating a unique combination of intelligence, daring, and social acumen that made him both compelling and frustrating, a student whose presence could instantly transform the mood, dynamics, and focus of any group, leaving teachers and peers simultaneously entertained, exhausted, and apprehensive. Amid all the chaos, there were moments of unexpected insight into Jake's character, glimpses of vulnerability, a desire for recognition beyond mere laughter, and a yearning for connection that, when understood, explained some of his more extreme behaviors, revealing that beneath the surface of recklessness lay a complex individual navigating the pressures of adolescence, social acceptance, and personal identity. And as the school year progressed, these layers became increasingly visible, making it clear that Jake's story was about more than pranks or attention-seeking. It was about a young person testing limits, seeking affirmation, and learning to navigate the complicated social landscape of school, all while leaving an indelible mark on everyone who witnessed his audacious, chaotic, and unforgettable journey. Despite repeated warnings, detentions, and even short suspensions, Jake's appetite for chaos and attention seemed insatiable, and as the weeks went by, his stunts grew increasingly elaborate, blending creativity, risk, and theatricality in ways that simultaneously amazed and terrified everyone around him. He would orchestrate pranks that involved multiple classmates, timing, and even school equipment, creating elaborate sequences of events that often left teachers scrambling to regain control, while students oscillated between admiration, envy, and cautious participation, unsure if the thrill of involvement outweighed the potential consequences. The social dynamics in the classroom shifted around him, with certain groups aligning themselves to either encourage or contain his behavior, and Jake, perceptive and strategic, learned to manipulate these alliances to maximize attention, maintain dominance in peer hierarchies, and continuously test boundaries, proving that his antics were not merely impulsive but often calculated with a keen understanding of human reactions. Teachers attempted new strategies to curb his behavior, from closely monitoring interactions to redesigning lesson plans, but each attempt seemed to be met with inventive countermeasures, from feigned compliance to subtle misdirection, illustrating Jake's adaptability and persistence, as well as the difficulty of managing a student whose intelligence, charisma, and unpredictability made him both a challenge and a spectacle. His peers were forced to navigate a complex social landscape where loyalty, Complicity and caution intersected, creating tension, excitement, and occasional anxiety, while friendships and rivalries formed and shifted based on participation in or reaction to his antics, making every day unpredictable and emotionally charged. Even outside the classroom, Jake's reputation followed him, affecting lunchrooms, hallways, and extracurricular activities, where teachers and students alike became attuned to his presence, anticipating mischief and preparing for the unexpected, yet often caught off guard by the originality and audacity of his schemes. Through all this, Jake displayed a strange combination of recklessness and social intelligence. While his actions often bordered on dangerous, they were also reflective of an innate understanding of attention, timing, and peer psychology, allowing him to consistently manipulate situations in ways that maximized reaction and engagement while minimizing immediate punishment. This balance of chaos and control made him a legendary figure in the school, a student whose antics were both entertaining and exasperating, and whose story served as an ongoing lesson in risk, consequence, and the complex interplay between audacity and social dynamics, leaving an indelible mark on teachers, classmates, and anyone who witnessed the unpredictable, thrilling, and sometimes terrifying spectacle of Jake, the class clown whose daring, creativity, and unrelenting pursuit of attention continually reshaped the environment around him and challenged everyone's expectations of what a student could do. From the moment Jake returned to school after his infamous paint incident, the social and academic landscape seemed to bend around his presence. As students, teachers, and administrators alike struggled to reconcile the sheer audacity of his actions with his undeniable charisma, intelligence, and magnetic influence on peers. And over time, it became increasingly evident that his behavior was not merely impulsive or reckless, but reflected a complex interplay of attention-seeking, social navigation, and adolescent exploration of boundaries. Every classroom interaction, group project, and extracurricular activity became a potential stage for performance, where Jake skillfully blended humor, exaggeration, and calculated mischief to draw reactions, maintain social dominance, and assert his identity as the class clown, a role he seemed to embrace with almost performative dedication, while simultaneously navigating the consequences of past actions, including disciplinary warnings, parental scrutiny, and the lingering fear among classmates that the next stunt could spiral out of control. Teachers found themselves walking a tightrope between enforcing rules and recognizing his creativity, often attempting to channel his energy into constructive outlets like leadership roles, creative projects, or mentorship opportunities, yet Jake's intrinsic desire for immediate attention frequently undermined these interventions. As he continuously tested boundaries, seeking the thrill of a reaction more than the accolades for achievement, and in doing so, revealed a deep-seated understanding of peer psychology, timing, and social dynamics that allowed him to manipulate situations in ways that were both impressive and exhausting for those around him. The classroom environment itself shifted in response to his presence, with students forming informal alliances either to participate in, amplify, or temper his antics, creating a constantly evolving web of relationships, loyalties, and subtle negotiations that transformed every interaction into a mini-drama of attention, risk, and social maneuvering. While some classmates idolized him, drawn to his fearlessness and comedic flair, others grew wary, resentful, or anxious, attempting to navigate the fine line between involvement and self-preservation, all of which heightened the intensity of the social environment and forced teachers to adapt lesson plans, supervision strategies, and disciplinary approaches on a nearly constant basis. Over time, Jake began to exhibit subtle signs of growth, as moments of vulnerability, empathy, or self-awareness occasionally punctuated his antics, revealing that beneath the bravado and risk-taking lay a young adolescent wrestling with the need for validation, identity, and connection, and these glimpses offered teachers, parents, and peers a nuanced understanding of his motivations, suggesting that with the right guidance, his creativity and charisma could be channeled into positive outlets without completely suppressing the energy and spontaneity that defined him. The consequences of his stunts, both immediate and long-term, became part of a broader narrative in the school, Paramedic visits, detentions, parental conferences, and whispered hallway conversations formed a backdrop against which every new prank, joke, or daring act was measured, creating a layered social context that combined fear, admiration, curiosity, and caution. And while the risk of physical or social harm loomed ever present, it also contributed to Jake's legend, reinforcing his identity and influence while simultaneously teaching peers, teachers, and administrators important lessons about boundaries, risk assessment, and the unpredictable nature of adolescent behavior. Extracurricular activities, school events, and public spaces were transformed into arenas of opportunity and danger, as Jake's presence could shift the mood, focus, and energy of the environment in an instant, eliciting laughter, panic, or frustration depending on the timing, audacity, and creativity of his next move, and the dynamic interplay between his desire for attention and the reactions he provoked became a living experiment in social psychology. Adolescent risk-taking and human behavior, observed not only by those in his immediate vicinity, but also by faculty and peers who would recount the stories, analyze the incidents, and adapt their own strategies for engagement and supervision. Throughout this period, his family, particularly his parents, were drawn deeper into the saga, attempting to provide guidance, impose limits, and instill an understanding of consequences while also struggling to navigate the delicate balance between discipline, encouragement, and support for their child's social and emotional development. And in doing so, the story of Jake became a complex narrative of risk, growth, humor, and relational dynamics, illustrating that even the most outrageous antics could coexist with moments of insight, empathy, and personal development, and that the life of a class clown, far from being merely comedic, could serve as a lens through which to examine courage, identity, social intelligence, and the multifaceted challenges of adolescence, leaving lasting impressions on everyone involved and creating a rich tapestry of human behavior, consequence, and the unpredictable yet fascinating journey of growing up under the scrutiny, admiration, and exasperation of an entire school community. As the school year progressed, Jake's reputation as the ultimate class clown reached new heights, his antics becoming more daring, his schemes more intricate, and his social influence more pronounced, as he navigated the complex web of friendships, rivalries, and alliances with a cunning mix of charisma, humor, and calculated risk-taking that both fascinated and exasperated everyone around him. Peers were drawn into his orbit, some willingly participating in his elaborate pranks, others observing cautiously from the sidelines, their reactions ranging from laughter and admiration to fear and frustration, creating a dynamic social ecosystem in which Jake's behavior dictated the mood, energy, and interactions of entire classrooms, lunchrooms, and playgrounds. Teachers and administrators struggled to balance disciplinary measures with recognition of his creativity and social intelligence, often finding themselves simultaneously exasperated and impressed by the ingenuity and audacity of his schemes. From orchestrating chaotic but harmless classroom disruptions to staging complex, multi-step pranks that required timing, collaboration, and precise execution, all while walking the fine line between entertainment and danger, leaving adults perpetually unsure of how to respond. Over time, Jake's antics began to carry more pronounced emotional consequences. Classmates who were once amused or entertained found themselves anxious, uncertain, or socially pressured to participate, while others experienced frustration or resentment at being caught up in his unpredictable performances, and even those who idolized him started to witness the risks and emotional toll of his constant need for attention, revealing cracks in the legend of the fearless, untouchable prankster. At the same time, Jake's own emotional landscape evolved in subtle ways. As moments of vulnerability, guilt, or empathy occasionally surfaced, particularly when he observed the consequences of his actions on friends, teachers, or younger students, hinting at an emerging awareness of the balance between humor, social engagement, and responsibility. Though his need for recognition and thrill often overpowered these insights, resulting in a continuous tension between recklessness and reflection. Socially, he became a polarizing figure. Some peers idolized him for his audacity and quick wit, while others actively avoided him, wary of being implicated in his latest stunt or enduring the collateral stress of his unpredictable behavior. Yet even amidst the chaos, Jake demonstrated an uncanny ability to read social cues, adapt to responses, and leverage relationships to maintain influence, cementing his position as both a leader and a disruptor within the student body, capable of shaping group dynamics, conversations, and even school culture with each new performance. The school environment itself became a stage, where everyday activities from class discussions to recess, assemblies, and field trips were transformed into potential opportunities for spectacle, experimentation, and social negotiation, and the cumulative effect of Jake's actions fostered an atmosphere of tension, anticipation, and excitement as students and staff alike adjusted their expectations, routines, and strategies to account for his presence, demonstrating the profound impact that one determined, creative, and audacious individual could have on an entire community. By the end of the year, Jake had not only survived his own reckless behavior, but also influenced the social fabric of the school, teaching peers about risk, attention, loyalty, and consequence, challenging teachers to find new methods of engagement, and leaving an indelible mark that blurred the lines between fear and admiration, chaos and creativity, entertainment and danger, and in doing so, he solidified his legacy as the class clown whose antics would be remembered, analyzed, and retold for years to come, a living testament to the unpredictable, complex, and often exhilarating journey of adolescence. By the time the school year was drawing to a close, the legend of Jake, the class clown, had reached its zenith, his antics, daring stunts, and relentless pursuit of attention leaving an indelible mark on teachers, peers, and the broader school community, and while the chaos he created often pushed limits, the cumulative experiences of the year also revealed subtle but meaningful growth in his character, as moments of reflection, empathy, and understanding of consequences began to emerge. Amidst the relentless drive for recognition and approval, students and teachers alike had learned to anticipate, adapt to, and even collaborate with Jake in ways that balanced creativity with caution, amusement with responsibility, and spectacle with the emerging awareness that his behavior, while entertaining, had real-world impacts on social dynamics, peer relationships, and emotional well-being. The aftermath of his most infamous stunts, including the paint incident and countless smaller pranks, served as lessons not only for him but for the entire student body, demonstrating the tangible effects of recklessness, the power of social influence, and the necessity of empathy and consideration in a community where one individual's actions could ripple outward to affect everyone. Over time, Jake began to experiment with channeling his energy into more constructive and collaborative projects, using his charisma, wit, and creativity to inspire classmates, lead group activities, and even assist teachers in organizing events, subtly shifting his role from disruptor to a figure who could balance entertainment with responsibility, still retaining the essence of his bold, attention-grabbing persona, but now tempered by an understanding of limits, consequences, and the feelings of others. His peers observed this evolution with fascination, respect, and cautious optimism, recognizing that the same audacity that once caused stress, chaos, and fear could also foster leadership, engagement, and innovation when guided by self-awareness, social intelligence, and a growing sense of accountability. Teachers reflected on the year with a mixture of relief, admiration, and insight, recognizing that while managing Jake had been exhausting and challenging, it had also provided valuable lessons about motivation, adolescent behavior, risk-taking, and the importance of structured guidance combined with freedom for creativity and expression, demonstrating that even the most extreme personalities could evolve under supportive, attentive, and reflective conditions. By the final weeks, Jake's reputation had transformed from merely the reckless class clown to a more nuanced figure, simultaneously remembered for his daring antics and celebrated for the gradual maturity, social awareness, and adaptability he displayed, leaving the school with stories that would be retold for years as cautionary tales, inspiration and evidence of how charisma, courage, and creativity, when balanced with empathy and responsibility, could shape not only one individual's development, but also the social fabric and culture of an entire community. Ultimately concluding, the school year with laughter, reflection, lessons learned, and the enduring understanding that growth, resilience, and self-awareness often emerge from the most chaotic, unpredictable, and challenging experiences.